Well, I hope you guys had a good weekend, because it's about to be over now. No more fun for you. You're in my world now. On Friday, we talked about critical thinking, right? We talked about kind of that overview, general idea of what is critical thinking, how do we use it, and I prompted you with a couple of questions, just kind of hopefully thought-provoking questions about the subject matter. I should have mentioned, all three of those questions I kind of threw at you guys on Friday. Those are all subjects we very directly address in this class, right? And we don't just look at it from a philosophical, like, what do you think? That's important, and what do you think part is important? But we have real data on all three of those questions as well. Especially the violence and media one. That's one of my favorites because there's still so many opinions out there about violence in media and what the effects of it are. But people haven't actually looked at the data that we've collected. We've done actual studies on this stuff. And so we have a real clear answer on whether or not violence in the media leads to violence in a society. But it's still good to think about those questions now, because again, part of the point here is not, what you think, but how you get there. It's the thought process that's important. And so it's important to kind of ask yourselves just intuitively, what do you believe on those matters? Because that's going to be important in how we address the issues later and how we take in that actual statistical data and studies that we do later. So today we're moving on to what would be chapter 1. If we were book people, it would be chapter 1. Like I said when we went over the syllabus. If you're a book person, there's a book in the syllabus, totally get it, it's awesome, not required to at all. If you do, this is chapter 1. It's about mass communication and its digital transformation. Mass communication is it's a term that unfortunately is just not widely used, and that sucks because it's the best term to use in this case and what we're talking about. When I started the program here, I called it mass communication because that's the most applicable, most honest term that we can use, but unfortunately nobody knows what the hell that means. Nobody in high school is like, oh, I want to major in mass communication, right? So instead they come here and they say like, oh, I want to study broadcasting, or I want to study filmmaking, or I want to study media. All of those are under the subheading. Those are all subheadings under mass communication, right? So what the hell is mass communication? What does that actually mean? Mass communication can be defined as communication to a large group or groups of people that remain largely unknown to the sender of the message. And if you think about all those examples we were just talking about, filmmaking, broadcasting, media, journalism, public relations, right? Communication to a large group or groups that are largely unknown, right? Put in another way, a single sender with multiple typically removed and or anonymous audiences. Mass communication is where you have a single entity sending a message out to a very large group of people that they will probably never know. It is, for all intents and purposes, one-way communication, right? Can you watch a movie and then talk to the director of the film? Sure. And give your feedback? Sure. But not in real time, There's no real-time back and forth to it at all. Same with the news, right? When you're watching the news, you can't give that feedback. You can offer feedback later, it's delayed, but you can't give immediate feedback. The most important part of mass communication is that it's a single sender with a broad, usually anonymous audience. When I put my message out there, I don't know who's going to see it. I know who I want to see it. I have what we call a target market, but it goes out to everybody, right? It goes out to everybody, and I usually have no control and no idea about who those people are, who's going to actually see that message. In the production classes and the media creation classes that I teach, that's one of the things I stress over and over again, is you have to think about your target audience. Who is it that you want to see this, and who's going to see it? It's not about you. It's not about what you want. It's about what your audience is going to understand. Right? And that's an important element when we look at the rest of this semester. As we talk about mass communications, talk about different media types, realizing that it's a diverse audience, that the speaker, the sender, usually has no interaction with whatsoever. Sometimes it makes a little bit more sense. It's easier to understand if we look at the converse of mass communication, and that's interpersonal communication. Right? Interpersonal communication is what you're much more familiar with. Right? Communication between two or more individuals, often in a small group, although it can involve communication between a live speaker and an audience. So again, in other words, a single sender with a singular, often present and known audience. Is this classroom mass communication or interpersonal communication?
Interpersonal.
Interpersonal, right? You're right in front of me. I know exactly who I'm talking to, right? I get that immediate feedback from you. But there's this thing. I'm doing both, right? Because that is going to go up on YouTube. And there are people who are going to watch this. Probably not a lot. I know there's going to be a lot of people like searching for this, but there's a chance somebody I've never met in my entire life and never will meet is going to watch this very moment. And in such a way, it's mass communication. So I'm engaging interpersonally, I'm interpersonally communicating with you, but I'm also mass communicating with my audience virtually. Okay. Hopefully you guys have all experienced enough media in your life, you've all engaged in enough media in your life, and you've also engaged in enough conversations in your life that you've been able to discern some differences between having a conversation face-to-face and having an interaction through a mediated source. In other words, you don't talk to your peers face-to-face the way you type in a YouTube comment section. I hope. You're a terrible fucking person if you do, right? We don't interact through a mediated source the way we interact face-to-face. And that's becoming incredibly relevant right now, right? We talked about that last Monday. Most of you said this is the only class you have that meets face-to-face. Is it a little bit of a different dynamic than your other classes? Right? That's my biggest fear about going online. My biggest fear about going online is that, like, I need that. Not just the physical, but I need the synchronous back and forth. I need the conversation. I can't do an anonymous audience. I need there's so much of a different feel and so much, I think, better learning that occurs when we have the interpersonal dialogue and not just the mass communication approach. Mass communication is great. Obviously, it's my fucking living, and I obviously like it. But it's not everything, right? It can't replace everything else. And unfortunately, the more and more we become familiarized and integrated and reliant upon mass communication techniques, the more and more we think it's a solution to everything. It's the old expression, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We think that mass communication is the idea to almost everything. In higher education, this is driving me nuts on multiple levels, but there's a big movement in higher education right now to just move everything online. Just go online. Larger colleges and universities have these things called MOOCs, M-O-O-Cs, where you can have 500 people in a class with one instructor and multiple graders. And from a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Right? That's 500 people's tuition you could generate with one instructor. And then you just hire a bunch of grad assistants to grade shit along the way. But it's taught where there's no interaction, there's no back and forth. You will never talk to your professor. Right? In a MOOC, the professor records a lecture, throws it out to the universe. You watch it when you want to watch it, and you do the assignments, and that's that. That's not the answer to everything. Can it work in some cases? Sure, absolutely. It's just not the answer to everything. And so it's important that we understand the difference between mass communication and interpersonal, and recognize that, yes, even though this is a mass communication course, we have to be very, very mindful of the limitations of mass communication. Recognizing that a single sender to multiple anonymous audiences is not a one-size-fits-all. Right? But that is what we're talking about this semester, is that particular mode of communication. What are some of the functions of mass communication? What are some of the ways we can and do use mass communication effectively? One is through surveillance. And just to make sure that didn't sound quite so creepy, I rephrase that to reporting. We use mass communication to report on the world around us. A very common expression in media studies is the world is shrinking. Right? Not literally, right? We're not flat earthers, we're not stupid. But, because yes, if you are a flat earther, you're in fact dumb. The world is is shrinking. And what we mean by that is, like, for y'all, like, how old are you guys? How old are you, Ben?
18.
How old are you, Adam?
18.
21.
21?
24.
24?
19.
Okay, y'all are babies. Do you remember life before the internet? Honestly, do you remember pre-internet? I doubt it. I doubt it. You know, that's one of the things I have to come to grips with every year is like, I'm fucking getting old. Because I remember when I started teaching when I was 24, right? And like, I could relate to the kids because we had the same general experiences and we knew the world the same way. And now, like, no, bro, y'all don't understand shit. I remember when we first got dial-up internet in my house. And that was the coolest thing in the world. Every other day you'd get a CD in the mail from AOL with 10,000 free hours. You used to have to pay by the minute for the internet.
Was it pretty slow too?
It was god-awful slow. It was, oh dear Lord, it was, oh, you would sit there for 6 hours to download a single picture. You know? At my house right now, I test my home network like a lot, because again, sad little man, nothing else to do. I'm regularly drawing like 30 gig a second download speeds, because I'm on a fiber optic network. I can download a 4K movie in like 5 minutes now. You guys didn't grow up in a world where you weren't able to know what was going on in other places. We live in an age where information is at our fingertips from around the world, with a few notable exceptions. We don't really know what's going on in China or North Korea or Iran or other places like that. But for the most part, if something happens in France, I'll know about it within a couple of minutes. That's insane. Honestly, that's mind-blowing. We take it for granted, but that is mind-blowing. When we talk about television in a couple of weeks, in the history of television in the U.S., cable television is younger than me. And that also bothers me a lot. And also, MTV is younger than me. That's there was a day and a time where the only way you knew what was going on the other side of the world is you had to wait for that message to get here through traditional channels. Telephone being the most quick channel, right? Pre-telephone, it was by mail. Yeah, we're going to talk about in here in a couple of weeks the Spanish-American War, which is a war that Spain and the U.S. fought over Cuba, basically. And how most of what both sides knew about the war was based upon mail. Going back, can you imagine? You're fighting a war by mail? Directions are coming by, think about the lag time and all that, right? We use media to know what's going on in the world around us. And we're incredibly fortunate that today we're getting really, really good at it. We're getting immediate feedback on what's going on around the world. And part of the reason I'm able to live an hour away from where I work is because I don't have to drive here to know what's going on in Freeport. Before I leave my house, I can know, should I bother coming to Freeport? Right? If there's bad weather, if some issues occur, right? Because of media, because of that reporting function, that surveillance function. We can't be everywhere, but we want to know what's going on everywhere. And that's one of the things that mass communication does for us. It allows us to surveil the entire planet anymore. Another function is correlation, or analyzing data. Before class started, I was talking about how, like, I love movies. I'm a big movie fan, but my wife doesn't. Not only because she falls asleep, but she has a real hard time following everything. There's a new show on HBO called Lovecraft Country. I don't know if anybody's watching it, but it's so good. It's so good. They just finished a series called Watchmen. Did anybody watch Watchmen? So you have to watch it. It's so good. It's nominated for like 300 Emmys, right? It's so fucking good. My wife tried to watch Watchmen because I was talking about how amazing it is and how great it was. She tried to watch it, but she's constantly, wait, what? Where does that? How? Who's this? What does that have to? She couldn't put the show together. She couldn't follow the details of the plot to see the bigger picture. We do that all the time, where we can't see the bigger picture, and that's one of the functions of mass communication, is to tell us the big picture, to connect those dots for us. To say, hey, you remember this thing that happened 300 miles away 2 weeks ago? Here's why that's relevant to this thing that happened 5 feet away from you 2 days ago. Right? They analyze data and explain to us connections we may have missed. Now, this is also where people get really pissy with the media. On Friday, one of those prompts was, is the media bias? And that's the biggest problem people have with the media, is their analysis. Whenever a media outlet, when a mass communication group connects one piece of data to another, that's where you have the opportunity for severe bias to come in. We don't talk nearly as much about it in this class as some of my others, which is unfortunate because it's one of my favorite things in the world. But conspiracy theorists do the same thing. They connect this to this, to this, to this, to this, to this, which is why they're eating babies. Nobody's eating fucking babies, guys. Stop it. Just stop it. Wayfair's not selling children. No one's drinking adrenochrome. It's not a real fucking thing. Read a book. Stop it. Pizza doesn't mean child sex. And if you think it does, you need to see a fucking doctor. Your upbringing was seriously flawed. If you can read the words cheese pizza and think of kid rape, what? How do you do it? Ben!
No, I don't know.
Oh, I just assumed you were one of them, sorry.
Oh,
You look like the QAnon people. You look just like you fit right in with it.
no.
You're from Wisconsin.
Yeah, no.
That's where shit goes wrong, right? Is when we analyze. When we take data, we report data, and then we go, okay, but how does it connect? That's where people find the complaints. And that's, we're going to spend a lot of time on that, especially when we talk about journalism. We talk about journalistic ethics. How do you make those connections in an ethical, responsible way? But we need media to do that. Not because we're dumb, not because we're sheeple. And, while we're on the subject, if I ever, in my life, hear you use the word sheeple, not to mock someone else who said sheeple, I will hate you forever. That is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. I hate it so much. Sheeple. Fuck off. What a real word. Really? What are you going to do with other people say? All right, Cletus, take down your fucking stars and bars. We'll have a conversation. I was driving to work today. That's really, you want to driving to work today. Some jackass just put 2 Confederate flags outside of his house. What happened there? And then he has a big old sign in his front yard that says, freedom! Confederate flags. Freedom. I just want you to just marinate on that for a minute. And tell me why I shouldn't buy a flamethrower. It's just, okay. So we need media. I get distracted sometimes. My brain's just like, wow. We need media to help us make those connections, to analyze that data. Again, not because we're dumb, but because we don't always see everything. We don't always think of those connections. And so it's good to have an outside source to bring us some of that information. We also use mass communication for cultural transmission, for teaching. I mentioned a few times in here, I have 5 kids. Got a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 6-year-old. They are so clearly influenced by the media that they take in, to the point where it's comical for me. It's funny in an annoying way. My 7-year-old and my 6-year-old love YouTube and TikTok. My 7-year-old is a fanatic YouTube person. She has her own YouTube channel, by the way. It's adorable. She talks like a YouTuber. She watches like Unspeakable and like all those silly, goofy, grown-ass adults who act like fucking toddlers, right? And make money. I don't know how, but they make a ton of money. One guy bought his own island just by being a fucking idiot on YouTube. My daughter talks like them. She uses the same cadence as them. She uses the same phrasing as them. My 6-year-old talks like a TikToker, right? She's always recreating things and narrating, and media teaches us, mass communication teaches us what our culture is and how we're supposed to be interacting with other people. You know, again, in very subtle ways too. You know, not major ways like, oh, movies are the ones who taught me how to tie my shoes, but in very subtle little ways, right? One of the things we're going to talk about in this class is the concept of toxic masculinity, right? And I realize, again, that's a subject that a lot of people are like, you're a little sensitive about it. That's part of the point. The fact that you get sensitive about it is just kind of more proof of why it needs to be discussed. Again, I'm 40. I grew up in a different generation than you people. I grew up with a dad who you don't show emotion, period. Well, where did he learn that? Yeah, he learned it from his father, but he also learned it from, look at the role models he had in media growing up. Men in film don't have emotions. It's only just the last couple of years that we're actually seeing men kind of break that idea of being able to show emotions in popular media. It's a new idea. We learn a lot about what's normal or abnormal based upon the media we consume. And so that's a function of mass communication we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. We have to recognize that up front. Part of the reason why a lot of social groups go after media, they're in the 80s there was the censorship of music, right? Putting the parental advisory sticker on music. The rating system, if you've ever wondered why in the hell this is rated R or this is rated PG-13, the whole background of that, the video game ratings board, all of those are because they're based in a very real, very honest idea that those things have a significant influence on the people who take them in, people who consume them. So we should be mindful of it. Do they go too far? Yeah. But the premise is valid. Media has a significant role in how we approach our world. Another function is just plain old entertainment. Escapism is one of my favorite concepts in media. Some people assume that because I teach film, I'm a film snob. I am not. I appreciate really good film, but I fucking love garbage movies. We talked about this the other day. I love turning off my brain and going, hey, you made a fart joke. Like, I love it. I need that. Right? We all do. We all have our escapist fit. For some of us, it's movies. For some of us, it's video games. For some of us, it's books. Right? For some of us, it's drugs. No judgment. No judgment. Just share. We all need to shut our brains off. And media gives us a great, relatively healthy way to do that. To just get away from the world. It's an amazing phenomenon when you look at American history and the media that correlates to it. When the United States goes through a severe economic downturn, the movies we make are about how wonderful life can be. Right? Think about the happiest movie. It's a Wonderful Life. Wizard of Oz. Right? Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He's like, look at how great everything can turn out, guys. And look when they were made. The Great Depression. They were made when we were like, fuck everything. And filmmakers were like, what if we could just distract you for a couple of hours? And that came this boom, this drug that we now need, right? Some media is just there to entertain us. That's it. It's just there to take our minds off of how shitty the world can be for a little while. Consequently, there are some people who think that's a bad thing. We had a former faculty member here who I would get into arguments with all the damn time. Because he thought that like sports and blockbuster movies and things like that, he thought they were a deliberate effort to distract you from the problems of the world. Yeah. I was like, no, you can do both. I can play video games and know what's going on in the world. I can do both. Entertainment is an important, necessary function of media, not just for what media is, but for society to function. We need that. An important concept that we are going to be dealing with from a lot of angles in this class is the idea of convergence. Teaching this part of the class was a lot easier before the Marvel Cinematic Universe came about, because now convergence, like people are like, oh, like in Thor. No, no. If you watch the Thor series of movies, that's one of the central points is that, oh, there's the convergence where the universes are, no, not that one. What we're talking about when we say convergence is the coming together of computing, telecommunications, and media in a digital environment. So that's a lot of big words. What the hell does that actually mean? The coming together of computing, right? Computing is just using machines to process data faster than we can. You know, it's one of those stats that people like to throw around or you hear anecdotally all the time. There's more processing power, there's more computing power in a TI-83 calculator than in the entire NASA control room that went to the moon. You know, the ability to process data, the ability to do raw calculations in fast times, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about computing, right? Telecommunications. Telecommunications is communication through digital means, right? Or through technological means, I should say, right? The telephone is telecommunications. The internet is telecommunications. Satellite television, cable television, right? And then media in general. Media is the content created. Right? So, convergence is where we talk about how the ability to process data is coming together with the ability to interact over virtual means, over technological means, and media creation to all come into that same pocket at the same time. They're all coming together. They used to be three different worlds. It used to be that you went to IBM for your computing needs, and you went to Verizon for your telecommunications needs, and you went to 20th Century Fox for your media needs. Now they're all one. They're all one place. You all have one of these, right? The ubiquitous smartphone. What's the least used function of a smartphone?
The call.
The phone. The phone. Nobody fucking talks on the phone. Every time I put this thing up to my ear, I'm like, this is bad. Somebody died. That's the only reason that I do phone calls, because somebody died. The computing power, the processing power in a smartphone, combined with the fact that I can text, FaceTime, or call, God forbid, to interact with people all over the world, combined with the fact that I can watch anything I want, listen to anything I want. The perfect example of convergence is in your pocket. Okay? You can also look at convergence from a technological standpoint, right? The phone, right, is a perfect example of technological convergence. But you can also look at it from an economic standpoint. How many of you guys have cable television in Freeport? Nobody?
No.
No. Trent's like, God, no, get away from me. Nevaeh, who do you, this is Nevaeh. Navi. Okay. Navi. I told you guys, I'm really bad with names. Navi, who's your cable provider?
Comcast.
Comcast, the great Satan. Right, everybody fucking hates Comcast. Everybody hates Comcast. Comcast has started to rebrand, right? So now it's Xfinity. Yeah, right? It's fucking Comcast. They're not fooling anybody. You know, slap a fresh paint of coat on it, it's still shit. So you've got Xfinity provides your broadband. And then Comcast owns Universal. So totally different. You know, the film studio that also has theme parks. And NBC is a totally different entity. And the Philadelphia Flyers have nothing to do with any of it. No, they're all Comcast. Xfinity, NBC, Universal, the Philadelphia Flyers, they're all owned by Comcast. It's all one company. They provide the network to get media into your house, and they provide the media that gets into your house. Now they have their own, like they're using they're selling iPhones and Androids, but they have a Wi-Fi, a cellular network. You can get Xfinity Mobile. They can be your cell phone provider too. Right? Think about an economic perspective there. People like to get freaked out about Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, like who has more money right now than if you made like $150,000 a day for the rest of your life, you would never get anywhere near the amount of money you have. Think about how much money Amazon has, how much money Google has, Facebook. Right? Think about the economic impact of all of that money coming together into one house, right? Into one single entity. And the ripple effect that has on society. Once you see, and we're going to talk about all these mergers that have happened over the last 30 years, when you see all these major companies crossing markets to form large conglomerates, there's a serious economic effect of that. There's also a cultural impact there. There's a cultural effect to convergence. I try my hardest to keep my personal beliefs out of stuff because it's not my fucking job. It's not my job. But I am, in fact, very, very, very politicky. I fucking love politics. I'm a junkie. I'm constantly watching talk shows, constantly listening to talk radio. I'm fascinated by it, right? What drives me insane, however, about convergence is how easy it makes it for you to never have to challenge your own ideas. Right? If I'm a conservative-minded person, I never, ever, ever have to confront a media source that might disagree with me. I can handpick all of the media I consume because it's personalized in my pocket. I can set up a Google News algorithm to only show me stories I like. I can get on Twitter and only follow people who agree with me. I can curate my friends on Facebook. I can always, always find somebody to say, yeah, you're right. Whether I'm conservative or liberal. That's dangerous. This is flat out fucking, I'll say it, it's bad. It's bad. And again, this wasn't the way it always was. There was a time where we all had the same couple of sources of data. You had your local newspaper and you had your 3 television channels. We all had the same information coming in. We could disagree about what to do with that information. We could disagree on how to interpret that information, but we all had the same data set to start from. Not anymore. Not anymore. We have radically different ideas of what 1 + 1 equals. Because we have the ability to seek out only the stuff that's going to tell us 1 + 1 = chair. If that's what we want to believe. And that's something that only happens because of convergence. And has that had an impact on our culture? I don't know. Look around, maybe? Are things a little bit tense these days? Again, I've been on this earth for 40 years, which I know to some of you is ancient, but to some people it's not that long. But in 40 years, never, ever, ever have I heard people talk about, flat out, openly, yep, we gonna shoot them motherfuckers. I have never outright heard people talk about glorifying a fucking civil war because of what you believe in. And the people who are pro-Civil War have all the media they need to justify and defend and strengthen their beliefs. And the people who are anti-Civil War have all of the news and the media and the data that they need to support their beliefs. And ne'er the twain shall meet. They never have to come to blows with each other. They never have to meet each other. And that's fucking bad. It's bad, guys. But to do this, to emphasize my point, bad. It's on the top. So what are some of the consequences of conversions. Well, I mentioned a few. I talked a little bit about some of the issues that we see already. But more specifically and kind of more to the point. One is media organization is significantly changed as a result of media conversions. Media organization today reflects more an oligopoly than anything else. Who knows what an oligopoly is?
Is that like a monopoly ruled by a small group of people?
Close, you're really close. You got the opoly part right. Opoly means ownership, right? So like monopoly is a single owner.
So it's multiple, it's an ownership of multiple corporations?
By who? What does olig mean?
So is it all multiple corporations by one single thing? So it's like multiple monopoly kind of thing?
Kind of close. Have you guys ever heard of an oligarchy?
Yeah.
Yeah? What's an oligarchy? Like Russia is an oligarchy, right? You have Russian oligarchs.
It's like the small group of people that rules everything, right?
But who are the small group? What makes those people the small group?
Um,
What do they all have in common?
well,
Rich. Ownership by the rich. Freeport's weird in a lot of fucking ways, right? I think we can all agree Freeport is weird. Not least of which is that there's still local media ownership in Freeport, which is bizarre, right? If Freeport wasn't the land that time forgot, big radio would have been bought out a long ass time ago. But because nobody knows where Freeport is, nobody ever knows it, there's no reason for Cumulus Broadcasting to come in and buy big radio. There's just no reason for it. So we still have local media. We still have locally owned media. And that's incredibly rare in the United States anymore. By and large, most media is owned by a couple of very, very, very wealthy companies. The rich own all the media. And these rich companies, you used to have mom and pop radio stations. Believe it or not, media used to be a family business. You would own a TV station and pass it off to your kids when you retired. You would own a radio station and pass it off to your kids. WREX in Rockford, the NBC affiliate, you know why it's called WREX? It's named after a person. It's named after the owner's son. The people who founded the television station, they named it after their kid. Years later, they ended up selling to a much larger company, right? And now it's lost, that meaning is lost, right? But as we get more and more combinations of these companies, we see fewer and fewer entities owning media outlets, right? Which, who fucking cares, right? Who cares? Oh, only 5 companies own all these media companies. Who cares? Why should you care? Why do we make a big deal out of that?
because they're what's producing all the media, so their own biases and stuff are what's going to influence it.
Yeah, but they won. Don't be a sore sport. They won. Isn't that how capitalism works? They won. Why shouldn't they get to do what they want? They bought it. I don't tell you what to do with your shit. So why is it bad that 5 companies own all of this media?
Because whatever they believe is generally what's going to be passed on to everybody else, so there's no counter argument to it.
Because remember the last slide? Cultural transmission? A couple of years ago, before Comcast bought NBC Universal was owned by GE, General Electric, the toaster company. And GE had a massive recall on their appliances because they were, just randomly catching fire. And turns out that's bad. Turns out that's a bad thing. We don't want that to happen. And the lead news story on ABC and CBS and Fox News that night was all GE recall. That was the lead story. This is dangerous. We need to look out for the public health. Please, dear God, if you have this device, send it back in. Oddly enough, NBC didn't cover that story. Weird. They must have just been busy with other stuff. Just must be. It creates longer lasting problems than just, who gets the money? It's who has the influence. who has the ability to shape a narrative. Another consequence of convergence is the type of media that we're exposed to. Like I said, when I started the program here, when I started the Mcom program here, part of the reason I wanted to call it Mcom and not broadcasting and not filmmaking and all is because I wanted it to be all-encompassing. And a big reason for that is because that's what the market is these days. When I started college, you were able to get a job as just what we call a photog or a shooter, where your job was just to film news events. That's it. All you did was run camera. Not anymore. Now you have to be what we call an MMJ, or multimedia journalist. Go to any television station, any newspaper, any media outlet, any journalistic outlet in the country, and look at their help wanted, look at their jobs available. Every single job that's available out there requires you to be a multimedia journalist. You have to know how to shoot, you have to know how to edit, you need to know how to perform on air, you need to know how to post social media, you need to know how to track social media, you need to know how to follow all these metrics. You have to do it all. One of my first jobs in college was working for the Rockford Register-Star, the newspaper in Rockford. And my job was a copy assistant. Right? So my job was to proofread the articles before they go out. That was it. That was all I did was proofread shit. Those jobs don't exist. They don't exist anymore. You have to do it all. You have to be able to do all parts of it because nobody just reads. Nobody just watches a video. They need it all together. And you have to be able to do all of it together. And that's because the media landscape has changed so drastically. Have any of you ever read the Journal Standard?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There's a medication for that. You guys know how many full-time reporters work at the Journal Standard?
2. 1.
Zip.
They fired their last 2 full-time reporters a year ago. Yeah. Actually, the music fit there. It was very dramatic. That was, I should have planned that better. There's no full-time employee of the Journal Standard anymore. Everything's run out of Rockford. Everything's run out of Rockford Register-Star. Pick up a copy of the Journal Standard. Don't buy it, for the love of God. Don't spend money on it. Go to the library. Right? We have a daily copy every day. And just go through it. And see how many of the bylines say Journal Standard as opposed to Rockford Register-Star. Or, who owns them now? Not Gatehouse. Yeah, Gatehouse. Or Gatehouse Media. Or you'll have people, so as a result of that, you get very few local stories in the Journal Standard. Because there's nobody out here to report it. There's nobody out here to cover it. Because it's too expensive. Right? It's too expensive. Even before the Journal Standard shuttered everything, you were lucky if you made $30,000 a year. Lucky to make $30,000 a year as a reporter. I realize that for some of you, you're like, fuck, $30,000, that'd be great. That's poverty. That is poverty wages. But you have to have a bachelor's degree, and you have to have experience, and you have to be above reproach, and you have to have standards. Oh, and also we need you to be your own photographer. Oh, and also we need you to edit your photos. Oh, also we need you to proofread your colleagues' work. Oh, also, if you could help with the layout, that would be awesome. I went to school to write. No, you need to do everything now. Right? And it's because the media landscape has gotten so compacted. Right? It's because it's gotten so tight. Jobs have become very, very scarce. And so the jobs that are available are very, very demanding. You need to know how to cover all of the bases there. Another consequence is the content of our media. We now have 24-hour news. And again, I realize for most of you, that's been your entire life. Your entire life has been 24-hour news. It's a relatively recent development. And it's still fucking weird. It's still weird. I have vivid memories of television stations going off the air at night. Vivid memories. Like you stay up all night long, and at like 2 a.m., the TV station would play the national anthem and show this really cheesy footage from like the 1970s, and then they would say, this concludes our broadcast day. And there would be nothing but static, nothing but dead air for like 6 hours. Not anymore. No matter when you are awake, no matter when you turn on the television, there will be a news reporter giving a live read. Well, what happens as a result of that? We need to find something to talk about for 24 hours.
Not always the best reporting, because it's always the first impression.
Yep. We need to throw something out there. We've got to fill that time. When there's not a pandemic going around, we have a weekly news program on campus. We do a weekly 30-minute newscast on campus. We've struggled to fill 30 minutes because nothing fucking happens around here. Nothing happens around here. And the stuff that does happen nobody talks about, so it's hard to get good information on it to do a news report about it. So we have like a 4-minute campus news segment. And then we have like a 5-minute national news segment. And then we have like a 6-minute entertainment news segment. Because we have to fill the time somehow. Like, it's hard to fill 30. 24 hours? Good Lord. Now look, a lot happens in the world every day. There's always something to talk about. But what do they talk about? Stuff that they think you're going to catch on to, stuff that they think you're going to stick around and watch more of. Whenever people complain about how, like, oh, why do we glamorize Kim Kardashian? Oh, why are all these celebrities on the news? Oh, you're the reason we do. Because you fucking watch it. You buy the magazines, you click on the articles, you spend your time watching it. You're telling them what you want to see. You can complain about it, sure. Go for it, First Amendment. But you're the reason. You're the reason they're doing it. They have to fill their news time with something, and they'll reach for anything. Anything they think you'll continue to watch, anything you do continue to watch, they'll keep putting on there. That consolidation, that convergence has created yet another layer of societal concern that we have. Like I said, I'm a news junkie, I'm a political junkie, I'm always watching the news, I'm always watching this kind of stuff. I had to really check myself a couple months ago because my daughters just walked in and out of the room while I'm watching TV, nobody looked, right? I didn't think about it. I was watching the news. I watched the news a couple months ago, and my 7-year-old daughter starts kind of crying. I'm like, what's wrong, honey? And she's like, oh, are they going to put me in a cage? I was like, oh, fuck. Okay, can't watch the news with my daughter around anymore. She saw a news report about the migrant detention centers. I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it at all. Not one moment was I like, man, I shouldn't let my child watch this. But she picked up on it, right? And it's because that news is always there that we're able to expose more people to it, which is great, but it's also dangerous in those circumstances. I have to physically remove my wife from watching the news sometimes because there's just so much emotional investment in some of the stories that it's fucking heartbreaking, right? It's absolutely heartbreaking. And you can really set there's a real crisis that's going on, especially with pandemic, especially with quarantine. Cases of depression going up because people are fixating on 24-hour news. They're able to see all these horrible, depressing things all the time. We need more escapism, and 24-hour news makes it harder for us to escape. It requires our self-control to have that escapism. And self-control isn't something that we're great at as a people, and to not be great at that kind of stuff. Case in point. Taking some fat. They eat a lot. Like a lot. Like put food in front of me. I'm lazy as shit. I don't move. It's ironic. I'm wearing athletic pants, but it's like me drinking Gatorade. Shouldn't happen. There's no electrolytes to replace. It's not needed. Like me walking up the stairs, that was my workout today. I'm good. go sleep on the couch for a while, recharge. I did it again. Went way over time. Sorry. Sorry, it's Trent's fault, guys. Everybody take it out on Trent. Get back to Trent. Trent, did you speak ASL?
Yes.
Don't do that to me. That's a threat where I come from. What's this mean, Trent?
Well, if you flip it over this way, it means work.
I know. What's this mean?
I'm not sure what that is.
Are you kidding me? The only sign language I know is
I mean, this is work.
That's work.
That's what I'm guessing, but I don't know what that means when you flip it this way.
I was told it means fuck. So doing this means fuck work.
There you go.
That's it. The other the other one I learned is
You stink.
what's this?
That I don't know.
Oh, okay. I was taught that if you do this and hold it, it means like if you hold your hand here, it means like Indian, like Native American. But if you do this and release it, it means skunk. So it's really fucking easy to be offensive in sign language.
It is.
Yeah, oh god, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, learn more swear words. That's your job. Your role is to teach us all how to swear. So there you go, guys. Lesson of the day. Fuck. Fuck word. Go team. All right, see you on Wednesday.